Welcome to another episode of the Superbold podcast. I'm Fred Joyle, and I have been looking forward to this interview for a few months since I was on his podcast, Leadership and Loyalty. His name's Dov Baron, and he is a leadership guru. In fact, he was named among the top 30 global leadership gurus. Twice he was actually named that. And he's also in Inc. magazine's top 100 leadership speakers. He has spoken at organizations like the UN. You've heard of that, right? The State Department, the World Management Forum in Iran, the U.S. Air Force, and the Servant Leadership Institute. And I want to know more about what that is, so we're going to dig into that. But he talks about leadership, but he focuses on human behavior and neuroscience, and he has something called emotional source code, and we're going to dive into that for sure, because that's something I really want to understand. He's got a couple of best-selling books, One Red Thread and Fiercely Loyal, How High-Performing Companies Develop and Retain Top Talent. Kind of important stuff to know these days. He's lived quite the bold life so far, and we're going to find out what his next bold moves are. And so, Dov, welcome to the podcast.
Cheers, Fred. Good to be here, mate. I'm happy to be here, happy to serve. Looking forward to our convo. Last time I really enjoyed our conversation, so I think we're gonna have some fun.
Yeah. So I want to understand how you got to be this way. Get you know what. To be a leadership guru and actually be recognized at that, because there's a lot of people who talk about leadership and they're full of shit most of the time, or they have accomplished very little. But your message is obviously resonating heavily with people. So what was the pathway that led you to these very powerful insights?
It's a long story, but the bottom line of it is that I am a bit of a lunatic in that I'm a polymath, in that I've studied lots of different things. So I started out studying metaphysical studies and traveled the world to study with these great spiritual teachers. And after many years, got kind of sick of people being spiritually enlightened and couldn't get their poo in a pile to hold down a job, make a dollar, or hold a relationship. So I started studying psychology because I wanted to understand what was going on. And became a Jungian therapist, and then got sick of people moaning and complaining. So like, okay, so let's find out about people who've really done well. So I started studying what was then called the psychology of excellence. Today that's called leadership. Started working with some athletes and entertainers and business people, and found that there was a lot of people who were kind of soulless. So started thinking about how to put those things together. And in '83, stumbled into very early days of what we now understand as neuroscience and quantum physics, and started to put all those things together. And as I put those things together, it became the answer to the question that I'd had since I was a little boy. So I can clearly remember being 10 years old and looking at my aunt and asking this question, which is, why do smart people do dumb things? And it actually goes like this. Why do people do what they do, even when what they do doesn't make sense, even to them? So my aunt would come home with a new boyfriend, and I at 10 could work out this guy's a douchebag, but she thought he was the best thing since sliced bread. And I could see he was the same guy as the last one, but with a new face. And that for me was the driving force of my life, that question. And it's become the driving force in leadership, because I look at these leaders who understand they have to change, know what they've got to do, bring in a consultant and spend $100,000 on a consultant or an organization to give them the tips. And then all they do is brag about that they brought the consultant in, but never did anything.
Yeah, consultants love that because it's a lot of repeat business.
Well, for me, it's very frustrating. I don't like it. If you're not going to do the work, don't hire me. It's okay. And actually, you have to qualify to work with me. on that basis. I want to know what will be your implementation strategy. And if you don't have one, that's okay. Find somebody else.
Yeah, well, it's the same thing being a mentor. There's nothing more frustrating than mentoring somebody, and the next month they haven't done what you talked about, and they're still talking. They want to talk about the same problem again. It's like,
Well, that's
no,
because people are assholes,
yeah, yeah,
right? They want to keep
yeah.
asking, but not doing.
Yes, that it's a lot easier to, it's why people can go to therapy for 40 years. As a Jungian therapist, I'm sure you were picking up on that. They want to talk about it, but they don't want to fix it.
Do about it. Yeah.
Yeah. They don't want to do about it. And we could spend the entire episode on the dumb things that I do that I shouldn't be doing, but
Me too.
not everybody wants to hear that.
Yeah.
But it is something to reflect. It's funny that you say that, because I think I was reflecting on my own behavior, saying, wow, that's a fairly dumb thing to be doing. And I'm not dumb, but I'm doing it. Why am I doing it?
But that's the key thing that I think everybody has to pay attention to here. So please understand, as I say these things, I'm not criticizing you. I'm recognizing human behavior. So it's very common. So to do these things does not mean you're unintelligent. In fact, the more intelligent you are, the more likely you are to do them. So it's actually counter to what you think, because these things are not logical or rational. They're driven by your emotional source code. And your emotional source code has its own emotional logic. 2 + 2 equals a chair. 2 + 2 equals a giraffe, right? It's yours. It doesn't make sense to anybody else but you. And it doesn't even make sense to you at a rational, logical level, but it certainly does at an emotional level, because your survival as a child depended upon it. And that stuff is so deeply ingrained that you actually have to dig in and find it to go, oh, that's why I do that.
Yeah, it much of it occurred when you were not intellectually processing anything.
Exactly.
You could have even been pre-verbal.
You could have been
But it's,
pre-verbal. You may not have had the cognition to understand it. You would, you have to think about it. The human beings, we're pretty lame creatures. When you look at other animals, some animals will push you out onto the savannah and then walk away. We hang around for, well, it used to be 18 years. Now we're hanging around for 30 years in our parents' basement. We're so freaking dependent as humans, more than other animals.
yeah.
And so we're looking at how do we survive, and we've built a whole set of coping mechanisms around survival rather than thriving. And we've not built the resilience for it. And the more that we mollycoddle our society, the weaker we become, because we don't build the strategies. And so we keep falling back into the familiar. And the familiar comes from the Latin word familius, which means family. It's what you learned in your early days. That's it.
Yeah. And when I talk about this in terms of boldness, I talk about how addicted we have become to comfort as an end in itself, rather than a place to go restore yourself. Comfort is the gas station where you refuel yourself, not where you go live. But we don't learn to do the difficult things because we're so in pursuit of comfort, and our parents have provided such a cushy birth for us that we don't have the stamina or the drive or the tolerance for discomfort.
Yeah, if Route 66 was still around, every gas station would be full of people park in the parking lot making camping tents, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly what you're saying. I mean, it's this addiction to comfort, and it is extremely dangerous. And just to think about it this way, that all innovation takes place under stress. All innovation takes place under stress. That means that you don't innovate, you tweak when you're not in stress. When people go talk about, oh, I'm reinventing, and no, you're not. You're tweaking. It's fine. Like, admit you're tweaking. That's fine. I'm not judging you for it. Fine. But don't call it what it's not, because the innovation will only take place when you're under enormous amounts of stress. In 2008, there was a massive amount of innovation took place because of the collapse of the banks. When COVID hit and we had everybody shut down, innovation took place. We're under the threat of a recession. Innovation is starting to climb because people are going, oh shit, we got to do something, as opposed to, oh, I don't think so. It's not that bad. Everything's all right. Well, we'll tweak it a bit. It'll be all right.
We have a tremendous ability to tolerate mediocrity or even a certain amount of just mild negativity. I think it's human beings. We can have a little bit of happiness, and it takes us through a whole phase of shittiness if we let it.
Yeah, it's very true psychologically. So the interesting thing about it is that when we look at this psychological piece within us, it is, Judeo-Christian conditioning has been that we must be tolerant people. And I tell people that's terrible advice. You must not be tolerant. You must be compassionate, of course. You must be kind and understanding, of course. But tolerant, no. Tolerant is, here's the line, here's the boundary, and you're allowed to push over it. And versus, here's the line, here's the boundary, do not go near it because there is a consequence. And if you bang into that, I will let you know the wrath. And I'm letting you know in advance. And this is what we become so tolerant that we're wishy-washy. And so what we have is a 77% of our nation who are tolerant, who are wishy-washy, and everything else is on the outer edges of the two sides of that, which is extreme. And that's not the answer either. What we need is radical centrism around, here's my healthy boundary, and this is what I'm going to stand with. And I can have complete compassion and empathy for you if you want to wear a dress and you're a bloke with a beard, or you want to grow a beard and you've got a womb. I don't care. It's irrelevant. And I'm just using that as an example. It doesn't matter whether you're black, green, purple, or yellow striped. It's irrelevant. What matters is for us to become very clear about the healthy boundaries of our value system for us, not for anybody else.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with anybody else. I'm not trying to impose it. It's mine.
Yeah, because that's where the fulfillment comes from, and that's where a purposeful life comes from. Is if you are living your values. If you don't even have them, you're just running the clock out. You're that
but
example.
You just said it. This is so important, Fred. And I want to jump in here. Sorry, but this is so important because of what you just said. Fulfillment, living a life of fulfillment, is an act of boldness. Right? This is the Superbold podcast, but it's a bold act because you don't put up with shit. You have clear boundaries. That's bold. And you might get rejected by people even in your own family. But that's bold. It's bold to live a life that is purposeful, that is meaningful, that is fulfilling. That takes boldness. You're not going to get there being wishy-washy about anything, about your business, about your corporate culture, about your employees, about your own. So you've got to, what are my value systems? What is the hill I'm willing to die on? If you don't know that, there's no boldness. It's an idea, it's a concept. It's a podcast you listen to, but it's not you being bold. You have to claim something to be bold. You have to decide the hill you're willing to die on. So that's why I love the title of the show.
Yeah. And people are constantly challenged by the fact that the clock is running, and it's I always put it this way because I think it's an analogy people get, is like, we're in the game of life and the clock is running, but we don't know how long the coach is going to let us play. We pretend like we're going to be in for the whole game, but at any moment we could be benched. So stop thinking you have all of this time to have a purposeful life, a fulfilling life, that to get to the stuff that matters, to evolve to the point where you care a lot more about impact than stuff, and connection more than dollars. And you have to evolve to that point because the whole world is telling you something else. It's It's like, no, this is going to make you happy. This emblem on your car is going to make you happy. This trophy husband, trophy wife, whatever, this suit. I would just as a crazy example, I was in Neiman Marcus, which is, nobody should go in there with a
Needless
credit card.
markups.
Yeah. This and I like interesting shoes, and people know this about me who's listening to the podcast. When I speak, I always have an
And people
unusual
who
pair
know
of shoes.
me, I'm gay from the ankles down. I have very interesting shoes, so I'm with you.
Oh, so I see these beautiful shoes, really all like blinged out and everything like that. And I think I'm going to pick these up. I'm going to grab these. I pick them up. They happen to be men's Christian Louboutin.
Okay.
So as soon as I flipped them over to look at the price, I saw the red bottom and I went, oh my God, they were $3,400. And I thought, yeah, that's not going to happen.
Right.
It's like, I don't think I've ever bought any article of clothing for even approximately that, even my best suits. But that was amazing. And what does that get you? To have spent that much? It's like you're paying a giant idiot tax in my mind, just to who would be impressed. I mean, you have to tell people that you spent that much on the shoes because you think that impresses people.
Well, I mean, that's the point, isn't it? I mean, that red bottom tells people,
Yeah.
right? And so that's what you see. This is part of the psychological problem we have in our culture. In a consumer culture, is that we're told that this, whatever this is, will make us happy. And the pursuit of happiness is an empty pursuit, because happiness is a transitory emotion. So just get that for a minute. Happiness
Yeah.
is a transitory emotion. I come tickle you, you'll be happy. I stop tickling you, you won't be happy. Right. And so it's transitory, whereas joy is not transitory. Joy is a choice. Joy is the recognition of value in a moment. Joy is the recognition of love and connection and all those other things in the moment. And yes, you might still wear pretty shoes and you might still wear nice suits or whatever the thing is, but there's no attachment to it. So being unattached does not mean you're walking around in rags or you're living under a banyan tree. You can do that, but that's not what it's about. What it's actually about is having no attachment to what you think it will bring you. It doesn't bring you anything. It's just an outcome.
Well, and you can tell how the possessions control you by your unwillingness to let anybody experience them with you or enjoy them with you. I've always had really nice, fun cars, and some of them were fairly expensive. And I would let anybody drive them, and they say, "Why you just let anybody drive them?" And I say, "Because it's a car." It's like,
Yeah.
I don't care. And my mom actually drove one of my cars, crashed it right into a pole, and she gets out of the car and she's bawling. Oh, I ruined this beautiful car. I said, "Mom, I don't care. I'm gonna fix it. I'm not emotionally attached to the car. I like driving it." But it's people, they have closets full of stuff, garages full of stuff. But what they don't have are really joyful moments, as you're talking about, because the reality is you could be in a really difficult situation, really painful, really challenging, really unpleasant, and still be joyful.
True.
Because you say, wow, I am deep in the game. It's like when you play, if you were a rugby player or something like that, you're constantly getting walloped in that game, and nobody's standing around going, ow, ow, ow. They're playing full out.
Yes.
And it's joyful to watch them play, and it's joyful to be in that game because
that's
it's
the interesting
intense.
thing. That's the interesting metaphor of sports. I'm completely fascinated with. I've written a lot about this. That they have the what is it called? The American football big day. What is that called? The
Superbold.
Superbowl. And I'm
Yeah.
sorry, obviously I don't follow it, but I'm fascinated by it because here are people, hundreds of thousands of people cheering from their own living rooms, from the back of their cars, from stadiums. The same people don't cheer for their own lives. The same people would, shit on their son, their daughter, their cousin, their nephew, their friend for having a big dream and tell them they're thinking too big. And meanwhile, they're cheering for I'm going to say the only team I know, the Dallas Cowboys or whoever it might be, and I'm like, why aren't you cheering for yourself? Why aren't you, who's cheering for you? Who's in your stadium? Are you in your stadium, or are you walking away from your own stadium? Do you cheer for your family, for your children, for your friends? When your friends get defeated, do you tell them that, listen, I'm coming back for the next game because you were all in and it was fantastic, or I'm all in on this game with me and I'm going to do this and I'm playing it out, even if I'm getting my ass kicked and I'm down X number of points, it doesn't matter. I'm playing full out, because when I walk off the pitch, I got to say, I might have lost, but I know I put everything into it. That for me is a fascinating metaphor, that we put so much time and energy into these teams and we abandon ourselves. We abandon the people we love, and we buy the right bloody shirt and the popcorn and the other nonsense and cheer and take a day off and get all that going on for a team who don't care about you, who don't know you, who will never give a damn about you. The only thing they like is you added some revenue to their bottom line. That's it.
Yeah, and there are people who are slowing you down because they're uncomfortable with you chasing your dreams, so they kind of let themselves off the hook. We're going to want to talk about this whole concept of tribes as well,
Yeah.
and the impact that has on people. But just to circle back to this thought of playing full out, and that's where the joy comes from. There's a very famous basketball coach, probably the most famous college basketball coach, John Wooden, and they asked him what his favorite
name. That's good.
Yeah.
Eh? I know.
Yeah. Well, he is a leadership guru, one of the first. And and they asked him what his favorite game ever was. And as it happened, they lost. And he talks about the game. He said, yeah, we lost, but every one of my guys gave it everything they had in that game. And he says, and it was a pure joy to watch. Sure. And that was my proudest moment.
Yeah.
And so that's it. It's like, get people in your life that encourage you to play full out, to chase your dreams with vigor. And so what? You get broken and beaten and you get up and you try again, because the clock is running.
The clock is running. And I want to have people get something here. We've talked about following your purpose, following your dream, creating these values, standing by these values, deciding the hill you're going to down. All those things are bold. And I want to get clear with people, because I think people often will mix up boldness with stupidity. And I don't mean that to be disrespectful to anybody, but just so you understand, we've all, particularly in North America, we've all grown up with this idea of get knocked down 7 times, get up 8. That's dumb. That's dumb. Get knocked down once, stay down long enough to work out why the heck you're on your ass, and then go, oh, okay, maybe I should do something different, and then certainly get up and go again. You're not going to stop getting up, but stay down long enough to work out why you're down. Otherwise, you're just asking to play victim. So it takes a certain level of boldness, of course, to get up, but it takes even more boldness to be self-examining and saying, hold on, what do I need to pay attention to here? How did I end up in this place? We before we started recording, we were talking about startups, and the percentage of startups that fail is far, far greater than any of them that succeed. It's like astronomically different. And the ones that succeed will all tell you, I did this, it failed, but I learned that. I did this, that failed, but I learned this. I did this, that failed, and I learned that. They include the learning piece. Whereas others say, I'm on my 46th startup and they keep failing. Well, you're doing the same stuff, you dumbass. There's nothing bold about that. It's stupid.
No, and the other thing that requires boldness, and this was probably one of the failings of mine, is early in life, until I stacked up enough failures, is it takes boldness to ask for feedback, to say, what do you see? Where do you see me messing up here? What am I doing wrong? What did I do wrong that you can see from the outside that I can't see from the inside? And because
No
we
one is
hate that. Nobody enjoys that,
no,
but
but
the
nobody's
bold move
objective
is
in
to
their
ask for
subjective
it.
reality.
Yeah.
You cannot be objective in your subjective reality. You need someone on the outside. By the way, that someone cannot depend on you, because immediately you've biased the situation.
Yeah.
So you pay me up front to tell you. It's not going to impact my opinion. It's not going to impact my analysis. I'm going to tell you that because I'm not worried about you taking my fee away. But if you're asking your COO or your CFO and you're the CEO, you're going to get some kind of flavored answer, because their livelihood depends on what you respond, how you respond. So this is why you need consultants, you need mentors, you need coaches, you need these people who will tell you the truth unbiasedly. And most people don't have the let's call them kahunas to do that. They don't have the gonads to say, I need the truth. They'll say it, but they don't really want it.
Right. And they'll kill the messenger.
Oh yeah. Oh, you'll fight it.
Yeah.
You'll
Yeah.
find some other sycophant to replace you.
Yeah, I need sycophants. I need to feel better about myself, even though I'm failing, because failing doesn't feel good. And it shouldn't. It should
No.
be instructive. It should be the part of the process of getting better. But as you say, don't be doing the same thing again, trying harder. It's like when so many people say, I think I need to try harder. And I would say what you would say. No, you need to try something different.
Right.
You need, harder is very seldom the answer if you're, unless you're just incredibly lazy. Then you do have to try harder.
Well, I'll just tell you a simple example that I learned from a friend of mine years ago. And this really changed my direction. He said to me, do you think you're a hard worker? And I said, I know I am. And he said, can I ask you a question? And I said, yeah. He goes, do you think you work harder than, and he used somebody as another example who was very successful. And I said, I honestly think I do. And he goes, I think you're right. And he stopped and he went, so he's more successful than you and you work harder than him. And I said, yeah. He goes, And he makes me wait. And then he says to me, who works harder, you or the Mexican gardener? He said, the Mexican gardener arrives at somebody's place at 6:30 in the morning and finishes at somebody else's place at 8:30 at night. Who works harder? And I go, the Mexican gardener. And he goes, who makes more money? And I went, shut up. You're absolutely right. It's not about hard work.
Yeah,
about
I love the pause to let you ponder that.
Oh yeah, I was like, oh,
who works harder?
not
You.
liking this
That's
smell.
right. It is you.
Not liking this smell. Oh, it's my own. Okay, I get it.
Yeah, that one stings.
Exactly.
So let's talk about the concept of tribes. And
Yes.
I want to, but first let's revisit this emotional source code concept, because we threw it out once, and I want people to know that this is the foundation of what you really talk about. And so, and then it integrates with this concept of tribes and what makes tribes successful, or doesn't. So I sent you that, and I'm going to see where you go.
So let's just talk about what emotional source code is first. So at a simple level, you need to think about your emotional source code as your emotional DNA. So it's already in place, but we now know, in case you are not aware of this, I'm not expecting anybody to be aware of it, the primacy of DNA has been completely collapsed. The idea that you are your DNA that idea has been washed away, because now what we know is it's the epigenetic response that makes the difference. Now, what does that mean? In case you're not aware, it means how the genes are responding to what's coming in from the outside. So you have a bunch of genes in you. Let's say you have a gene that shows the possibility of a particular kind of cancer, but you eat, sleep, and do all the right things, that gene is not switching on. It's just not switching on. However, other behaviors will switch it on. So there's an external responding to the cell. That external is the neurochemistry produced by the brain, particularly by the hypothalamus, the mood and appetite center of the brain. It's releasing this neurochemical. Your cells are building receptors for that neurochemistry and taking it in, and you actually become addicted to that neurochemistry. So that's a huge subject. We can spend hours on that alone. But just to understand, your genes are there, but they're not necessarily turned on. Your emotional DNA, which is your emotional source code, is there. It might be turned on, it might not be turned on. But what it gives you is the anatomy of meaning. So, what does that mean? It means you have interpreted what is going on with you via whatever that emotional DNA is. Once you get that meaning, it gets pretty locked in. That meaning then gives you your identity. So if you're beaten and the world, and you see the world as a very threatening place, when you're a child, you now have meaning that the world is an unsafe place. You build an identity that is called victim. I'm just using this as an example.
Yeah.
You build an identity that is victim, and you'll build a bunch of values and belief systems around that that will drive your behavior. Now, what happens in that is because of something called limbic resonance, which is a neuroscience area and quantum physics, you will then go out into the world and look for other people who you resonate with, and they will become part of your tribe. And this is why we are pulled towards certain people very quickly, and others we're almost compelled away from. And sometimes, and this is, I recommend this to all the leaders I work with who are political leaders, athletes, entertainers, CEOs, whatever they might be. And I say, please look at who you're compelled away from. Because this person is either the best possible teacher you could have, or they know they have something that is so you that you're in shadow of, meaning you won't examine it. But they can teach you because they've come through where you've gone to, and you can't bear to look at that because it's like, ooh, that's going to take some work. Or they seem very opposite to you because they're showing you something that's in your own shadow. So as an example, if you can't stand Joe Biden, what's the reflection of yourself in that? If you can't stand Donald Trump, what's the reflection of yourself in that? And I'm just using two political figures because they're easy to pick, but it could be anybody or anything. It could be your neighbor down the street. You start looking at that as, this is either my shadow revealing itself, or this is my teacher waiting to teach me. And now suddenly I'm not in judgment. Suddenly now I'm in, oh, let me pay attention. Let me learn. That's vastly different. Now there's no victim. There's no superiority. So I'm not the victim, lower than, and I'm not superior, higher than. I'm an observer learning.
Wow. I mean, that's incredibly insightful and powerful. If you can just, as a listener, I hope people can hear this, because when you said they're either something that's reflecting you need to see in yourself that you don't like or don't want to acknowledge, or there's someone to teach you something, each of these people that you are repelled by, and you will have a judgment about.
Yeah.
But when you see them from that perspective, I'm really just repeating what you say because I want to absorb it myself. But the judgment is set aside, and we spend so much time and energy judging other people and not realizing they're doing the same thing to us, and nobody's accurate and nobody's accomplishing anything by judging people and criticizing them, whether they know them or not. What I talk about for bold people is I say bold people have a very small group of people whose opinions matter to them.
Of course.
And they don't worry. They know people have all sorts of judgments about them. I know that. I know you know that as a speaker, that 10% of the audience
Hates you the
thinks you're
minute you walk on the stage.
yeah, they've judged you by your beard. That's all they needed to know. He has a beard. I don't want to hear what he has to say.
Exactly.
And then the 10% of the audience loves you just because you have a beard. So everything you say is a gem. And so you can't absorb that as reality or truth of what you're offering. It's the person who comes up to you and says, I've been waiting to hear this for 10 years. And when you said it that way, I finally got it. So thank you. That's when you know your message did what you found that person, you reflected to that person and gave them what they needed at that moment. And you and I know, room full of 1,000 people, if 2 of them say that, you're fully gratified from that, because it's like, and so. And I think what people do also when it comes to tribes is that lets them off the hook for not striving. You know, a typical example is, you know, we have 40% obesity in this country, morbid obesity, not just 10 pounds or 15 pounds overweight. And they tend to hang out with each other because they're not saying, are you really going to have ice cream? On, you know, you just had popcorn and peanuts and candy, but that the tribe insulates you from self-examination, I think.
But and I think you made a very good point there, Fred. And I think that's what people need to understand. So again, you know, we talked about bad pieces of advice, which is get knocked down 7, get up 8. Well, here's another bad piece of advice: hang around like-minded people. That's terrible advice. Hang around people who don't agree with you. You won't grow, you won't learn by living in an echo chamber. And by the way, social media is already doing that for you. The algorithm is there to feed you more of whatever you click on. So people always laugh at like I showed my friends what shows up in my stream. And they're like, what? This is weird. And I go, yeah, because I click on Hannity. I click on Hannity, and I'll click on some extreme leftist. I click on the extreme left and the extreme right because I want to screw with that algorithm.
Yeah,
I
you're
want it to actually understand.
gaming the algorithm.
Yeah, I'm simply wanting to understand that I am a radical centrist, that I will listen to the extremes on either side. It doesn't mean I believe them, but I will listen. And when I get my news, I get it from the BBC, Al Jazeera, CNN, Fox, Breitbart, and a bunch of other places, because I don't want a opinion. I want multiples and a lot of independence. And so this is the key we got to understand. If you're going to be bold in the world, if you're going to make a difference in the world, I mean, let's talk about what bold really means. Bold means you're committed to making a bloody difference. If it doesn't mean that to you, stop even using the word. Like, it means you're committed to making a bloody difference in the world with something, right? And what does that mean? It means you've got a hill to die on. And that means that you are going to have to grow, and you're going to have to piss off some people along the way. And you can't do that in an echo chamber, because all that happens in your echo chamber is you end up living where I'm from in Australia was called tall poppy syndrome. You pop your head up and you get your head cut off. So it's not about that. It's about saying, this is not right. Let's create some values around this. Let's bring people together. Being bold means standing up for something. And I think that's such an important point, Fred, that you made. We have to come back to that.
Yeah, and if you are going easy on yourself all the time and never taking bold action, your boldness muscle is completely atrophied. Basically, I look at it just like a muscle.
Yeah.
So that when it does matter, when you do have to speak up, you know, somebody has just told a racist joke, and because they're in your tribe, you go, it's them, you know, instead of saying you need to never tell that joke again, because you have to be bold enough to do that. You have to have, and if you see a bully, if you see somebody hurting somebody, even verbally or emotionally, you need to be bold enough to take action. If you have the analogy I often use is people, because I've gone to too many funerals at this point, and they'll invite people to say stuff, and nobody will say anything until I do. And then people will start to say stuff, and a whole bunch of people will never say anything. And I'm thinking, you love this person. You've known them 30, 40, 50 years, and I don't like speaking in public. It's like, oh, isn't that great? You think this is a performance. Instead of, oh, I might cry. Oh, wouldn't that be awful? We would think so little of you if you got up and cried in front of us. It's like they run all of these things in their head instead of boldly stepping up and saying, this person I have loved as long as I've known him. The day we met, we knew we were going to be best friends. And we did these things together, and we had good times and bad times. And I'm going to miss him every moment of the next 3 years. Be able to get up and say that, because the window closes. This is what I tell people: is hesitation is causing you to retreat into comfort, rather than go into discomfort and act boldly. Bold people don't hesitate. They go in and see what's gonna happen. They're gonna act.
But even more, I think this is an important thing here. One of the subjects I talk about is conscious versus unconscious courage, and this is where you really understand boldness in a different level. And what I mean by that is, we've all seen the interview with the guy who ran into the burning building and saved the puppy or the kid or whatever it was, right? And then they'll say to this person, you're a hero. And this person will say, I wasn't a hero. There's nothing heroic about it. I just did it. That's called unconscious courage. You didn't have to think about it. You just knew what to do and you went and did it. Does it deserve a round of applause? Of course it does. Does it deserve acknowledgement? Of course it does. But what really deserves courage is conscious courage deserves the applause. And conscious courage is, I'm shitting myself. There could be dire consequences.
This could go really badly.
But I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
That's conscious courage. That's what real boldness is. It's, I can think about it and I can talk myself out of it very easily, but I'm going to do it anyway. It's that conversation you don't want to have with your kid, with your spouse, and you go, oh, this could so blow up in my face, but I got to do it. That is an act of courage. I'm working with a client recently, and she's a CEO, and she said, she's telling me about something. I said, you got to go home and talk to him about this. You got to go home and have this conversation with your husband. And she goes, it'll blow up. I know it will. And I said, you're probably right.
Yeah.
But what are you going to find out that you're not willing to answer, that you're not willing to admit right now? And she goes, well, I just know it's going to go wrong. And I said, no, I don't want you to look at whether it's going right or wrong. I want you to look at are you going to reveal to yourself by the results that you've not been willing to see? And I get an email the next day, and it went exactly as I expected. It blew up. It was disastrous. And I go, great. Now, what did you see that you've been in denial of? And she wrote back to me and she goes, oh my God, I've been putting up with emotional abuse for years. And I go, uh-huh. She goes, you knew that, didn't you? I go, oh yeah, I knew that first conversation. Not because I'm a smart ass, but because I'm on the outside. And you don't want to see it. Not you, all of us don't want to see what we need to see. That's the boldness. That's the courage of conscious courage and saying, all right, I know this could go wrong, but what little part of my soul will die if I don't do it? And that's a question I love to ask. What little part of your soul will die? Who will suffer if you don't step into your greatness? Who will suffer if you don't claim your own boldness?
Yeah, you're you're guaranteeing that it nothing will change, nothing will improve because you're not addressing it. So most likely it's going in the other direction. It's going to get a little worse and a little worse. And with emotional abuse is a great example. Is the more you tolerate it, the more you can tolerate.
Of course. That's
But
the whole thing
your
around tolerance.
self-esteem is disappearing, and
Exactly.
it's a long road back. The deeper you go into it, it's like depression. The deeper you go into it, the harder it is to climb out of it.
Yeah.
And so
this is why, when you talked about tribes, it's about understanding, as you said it earlier. Bold people have very few people who they care about their opinion. Their tribe is actually small, it's succinct, and it's also filled with other bold people. Right? I don't want to be surrounded by sycophants who will tell me how great I am. I want to be, of course, I want those psychologically. Of course I do.
they're
We
fun.
all do. Right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I want people who love me enough to kick me in the pants and say, "You're way off here, mate. I love you. And because I love you, I got to let you know this is not okay." Whoa. Okay.
When I have friends that do that with me now, and I'm at a point now where I just thank them immediately, because it's like, oh, thanks for the glimpse of that I was not seeing right in front of my eyes. And they know I love them for it as much
Sure.
as anything. And those are the real friends. It's like, what you're veering off course here, or I am blessed with this group of men that we have dinner once a month, and they're all different walks of life and the full political spectrum, which is also great because
Yep.
I respect them completely, and they're 180 degrees for me sometimes.
Sure.
But how did you get there? How do
Yep.
you see that? Tell me how you saw that. But I can just remember the last dinner, one of the guys just turned to me and he said, and I was talking about a person in my life that I'm helping out financially, and he said, "So you're enabling them?" And I said, "No, I'm like," he goes, "Well, tell me how that's not enabling."
Right.
It's like he was never going to let me out of the box.
No.
And it was great. And we all talked, they all had feedback for me. And I didn't feel I had to justify it. I had to absorb it.
I have a
And
very good friend who was a client, and actually he still is a client. I'm still on contract with him, but he's become a friend. I've worked with him for 15 years as his mentor and his guide, and he very often says this. I don't know if you could. Can we swear on here?
yeah.
And he says, I'm talking to him, and he brings up something, and he just looks at me, and he gets a big smile, and he goes, "Fuck you," because I've said something to him. He goes, "Fuck you, fuck off," and then he laughs and goes, "I love you," and it's exactly that.
Right, because you hit him right on the head, and he couldn't
we're not
dodge the
messing
bullet
about.
anymore.
This is what it is. And I go,
Yeah.
I'm not doing it to piss you off. And he goes, "I know, and I really appreciate it." He goes, "I just, it kind of sucks to hear it, but you're absolutely right. Okay."
Yeah,
But
no, that's the people need to realize. You're entitled to have your reaction to it, but don't make that the barrier, keep it from penetrating. Just say, "Oh, well, that stung." You get to say "ow," but at the same time, you have to say, why did that hurt? Why can I not deflect that as not true?
Right.
Because it
is. And even though I don't want to admit it, it is. Okay.
Yeah. One of the, you in talking about emotional source code, had embedded in me at a very early age that rich people were jerks, were greedy jerks, were assholes. And the impact of that for decades was, no matter how successful I was going to spend all of it, because I didn't want to be a rich asshole.
Yeah.
Right. And now I am my peer group, a majority of my peer group is somewhere between incredibly successful and, I have had the occasion to spend a certain amount of time with Richard Branson, who he's not just rich, he's like really rich.
It's a
And
whole
he
nother
is
category.
one of the nicest guys I've ever met, the most
Yeah.
generous, the most kind, the most fun, and the most egoless.
Mhm.
So I get it, I'm wrong so often about that embedded code that I just can't um I've dispelled that part of it, but I also have to look at what the code has done to me in my emotional behavior towards money,
Exactly.
because that's where the real damage is occurring.
Yeah, exactly. So, I know that I had a similar emotional source code around money when I was a kid because I grew up very, very poor. And so I had this idea that they were all assholes. And so I decided when I get money, I'll be incredibly generous. Well, that was a great way to make sure that I never had any money
It goes
because it
out
was
in
just like,
every
all right,
direction.
a hole in my pocket. And then I realized because I was dealing with more and more billionaires and very high powered individuals that the largest majority of those people were extraordinarily generous and kind, right? But they weren't all, but they were almost always, not always, not totally, but almost always discerning about that generosity. They weren't going to enable me or someone else in doing the same shit. They were, but if they, if they wanted to support you in something, they'd go all in. And I was like, wow, I've really learned from that. Because people would reach out to me and they say, I can't believe that you're talking to me. And I go, why? And they go, yeah, I know who you work with and know you deal with. And I said, did you need help? And they go, yeah. I go, let's wire in the combo. And they're shocked. And I'm going to do that. Now, am I going to do that with you 3 times in a row and listen to the same shit and you not doing anything? No. I say to you, okay, I'm giving you this half an hour and you got to go do something. And when you've done it, you can send me an email saying you've done it. And then I'll consider whether I'm going to do anything else for you because it's not on me. It's on you. This is your life. You go do something. And that is a very common uh, level of generosity that I've found in the most successful people. Like they're not whimsical with that generosity. They're poignant with it.
and
But
and
it's
often demanding. They say like, I'm gonna do this, but for this I need to see you, if I'm gonna help you with this startup, I need you to be busting ass on this every day. And I invested in one of my best friend's son's businesses, and he had never run a business before, but he had this incredible skill, and so I invested pretty heavily in him. He was so coachable. It was like I would watch him become a better businessman every week. And he had, and some of the stuff he had was terrible emotional flaws that was totally impairing him. But when I called him out on it, he said, yeah, I have to stop that. And I said, you have to find out what's driving it, what fear is driving that, or whatever that's making you behave that way. But you're trying to create a business culture here, and it has to feel safe. And he's become a person who grows talent. He delegates brilliantly, and it's a joy to watch him. It's like it's such a satisfying investment because I've given people buckets of money that they've done nothing with. And it's a hard lesson to learn, but you have to lay out your expectations if you're going to be generous.
Well, this is the other thing. People talk about unconditional love. And I say, if somebody's giving you unconditional love, it's incredibly dysfunctional. And they go, what do you mean? I said, if there is a God, you may believe there is, maybe you believe there's not. But if there is a God, that is the parameters of God to love you unconditionally. Maybe God loves me and you and Adolf Hitler and Joe Biden and Donald Trump equally. Okay, maybe that's God. Human beings are not God. We need conditions. And if we're healthy, we have healthy psychological boundaries. And if we're unconditionally loving, then that means you can take a poop on my head and I'm going to say thank you. Well, I'm not that unconditional. I can tell you that. I'm definitely not. I'm not going to be okay with that. I'm not going to be okay with being used, and I will have healthy boundaries. And if you don't, you need some therapy, and that's okay because most of us do. But go get it and get the help, because that's the only way you'll grow. Again, boldness often requires boundaries for yourself as much as for anybody else, because they're not walls, they're boundaries. Boundaries have flexibility based on who they're dealing with.
Well, and that's the bold part of being generous, because it's easy to give money with no conditions, unconditionally.
Yeah.
Just but if you say you have to be willing to say, I want to see every month what you've done to get yourself out of this hole that you're in, and I'm happy to lend it to you, or I'll give it to you every month, and if you do these things, then I'll give you next month's
Yep.
money, whatever. So and that's the harder thing to do, and people avoid that. Well, I don't want to be demanding. It's like, why not?
Exactly.
Why are you going to give them free reign? And it's just like even having employees. If you don't tell them what you expect them to do, and I was terrible at this too. I created a great work environment, and I didn't tell them what I expected from it till much later. When you don't do it, they do what they feel like doing, or they do what they think you might want them to be doing rather than what you want them to be doing, or as hard as you want them to be working. You know, it's it takes boldness to spell stuff out, and it takes
But
it in a
boldness is
personal
clarity,
relationship
right?
too.
Boldness
In a
is
marriage.
clarity.
Yeah.
Boldness is clarity in a marriage, in any relationship, in a business relationship or otherwise. If you're not going to have clarity, there is no boldness. You're fooling yourself. And if you're struggling to be bold, it's because you don't have clarity. It's that simple. So if
Yeah.
you go, okay, well, what do I'm really have a struggle with being bold, then my answer would be, that's okay. Tell me where your clarity is lacking. And they go, I think I'm pretty clear. No, you're not. How do you know? Because you can't be bold. Because if you were clear, you would be bold for one simple reason, that this is not acceptable, or that is how I want to live. That's it. So you would be bold. And it's just a lack of clarity. So that's the work. Go away, do that. If you're listening, watching this, and you're going, yeah, I just don't think that I'm that kind of person. I grew up and I was always very nice. No, you don't have clarity. Nice, NICE, neurotic, insecure, controlling your emotions. That's all it is, right? That's what being nice is. You're not clear yet. Get clear on what matters most to you, and you will automatically become bold.
That is it in essence, and that is solid. And that seems like a great place to end what could be another 2 hours of conversation
At
here.
least.
But
Thank you, Fred.
Dov, I so appreciate you taking the time and going so deep into this stuff. And I this has been an enriching conversation for me, and I look forward to more. And I hope people know that that Dov is out. He is being generous with his experience and wisdom and knowledge. He has a great podcast, Leadership and Loyalty, that I think you would find fascinating. It's an amazing group of people that
Yeah, there's
he's
a pretty
had
good
on.
guest on there. His name's what was his name? Joel Fred or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Fred Joyful, I think
Fred
he's always
Joyful, isn't it?
happy,
Or is it Bedfred? I don't know. Fred Joyal, I think is the name. He goes on about something to do with being bold or
No,
yeah, something like that.
he wrote a book about the Super Bowl, the
Super
football.
Bowl. That's what it
Yeah,
is. Yeah.
yeah,
He's the guy who wrote the book about it. That's why I knew it was about football. Thank you. It was a
So
pleasure being here, mate.
yeah, and his website is Dov Baron, DovBaron.com. You can book him as a speaker, as a consultant. You got to get through the filters, though. He's going to qualify you. So, but it'll be worth it. So, thank you, Dov, and everyone else out there. Keep on chasing your dreams more boldly.
Thank you, Fred. It was a pleasure and an honor.
Thanks, everybody.